Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for our lives, and we thank you especially for the lives of our leaders, the Prime Minister of Australia and his good lady, and the Prime Minister of Fiji, his good...
We shall have the opening prayer by Fiji's role.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister of Australia, Honourable Cabinet Ministers, Your Excellencies, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, former President of Fiji, ladies and gentlemen, Pula Vinaka, and a very good evening to you all. Tonight we celebrate the friendship between our people. Friendship that has never been stronger, and a partnership between governments that has never been more equal. That parity has never been clearer than it is here in Suva tonight. As you being here, Prime Minister, marks the first bilateral visit from an Australian Prime Minister to Fiji. I know I'm not the only one who is surprised it has taken this long to welcome an Australian leader for a visit of this nature. We are neighbors after all. Tens of thousands of our people have settled in Australia, and hundreds of thousands of Aussies visit us in Fiji every year. The over $1 billion in annual two-way trade between our countries supports thousands of jobs in our countries. The Fijian and Australian people share an affinity for each other that has only gained in strength over the years. And today, luckily, the only rivalry between us is reserved for the rugby field. When our nation and our people have been left devastated in the aftermath of ever-worsening cyclones, Australia has always proven to be a friend we can count on. And neither I nor the thousands of Fijians who have been assisted by Australia's support in the wake of disasters will ever forget the full measure of your friendship in those trying times. That gratitude, Mr. Prime Minister, is shared by the many Fijians studying on scholarship in Australia or learning in Australian-funded schools here in Fiji. Those Fijians employed in Australian businesses, or those starring in rugby and other sports in Australian clubs. So I hope that this step up, as it's been called, proves to be the greatest of many steps that have already been taken in the long, often rocky path that has led us to this evening. Our partnership today is strong and it is deepening, as are the rest of Fiji's connections to the world. We are currently in the midst of massive diplomatic expansion, and for good reason. The rest of the world is watching what's happening in our country. They see our soaring economy, our newfound political stability, and our inclusive society, following the removal of past discriminatory practices. They see our educated workforce and our investor-friendly policies, and they see their role in the Fijian success story. In the past 4 years, we've welcomed leaders from around the world here to Suva, including the heads of government from China, India, and New Zealand. So it is high time we played host to Australian leadership. And Prime Minister, you deserve credit for taking a step forward in our bilateral relationship, a step that your predecessors hesitated to take themselves. And while it was a short flight to Suva, your presence here has already taken our relationship a very long way indeed. Your engagement with the Pacific is absolutely a step in the right direction. And as Prime Minister, your presence here sends a clear message that you take our partnership extremely seriously, setting a new precedent and a new expectation for this relationship by adding your own personal touch. And the leadership you've shown will hold benefits for Fijians and Australians for years to come. As we welcome you tonight, I do so knowing you are no stranger to our country or to our people, as you and your family have many special memories from the holidays you spent with us in Fiji. But even though you may find yourself back wearing bula this evening, your visit is for a very different purpose. You are here to strengthen a friendship that benefits Fijians and Australians alike, and I'm ready to work with you in that regard. Your most recent announcement that you plan to ease the restrictions for the import of kava into Australia is a great start. It has already made you a very popular man among our Yongona farmers, as well as with our diaspora community across Australia. And this may even mean new votes for you in your upcoming election. Our countries are taking great steps forward, but it wasn't always that way. I'm speaking, of course, of Australia's serious step back from Fiji in the immediate years following 2006. However, it is only through acknowledging those rocky times in our shared history that we give ourselves and the many young Aussies and Fijians today who didn't live through it full appreciation for our newfound progress. Prior to 2006, the reality of what was happening in our country was grim. The government of that time in Fiji had no interest in addressing the systemic corruption that had plagued our nation for decades. Our institutions were weak, under constant siege from leaders who held no respect for their independence. And any attempt to build up our nation was undermined at every turn by sectional interests, backed by a societal elite who pitted Fijians against one another on the basis of ethnicity, religion, and province, all to keep themselves wealthy and powerful. In those years, certain Fijians enjoyed rights that others did not. They had access to education and jobs that were denied to others, and their votes carried greater weight. Many of our citizens were unable to call themselves true Fijians in their own rightful home, and tens of thousands of our people, many of our best and brightest, fled our country, after losing hope in a truly inclusive and equal future. Australia is a proud democracy. The Australian people enjoy a political system where their rights are respected, their votes matter equally, and their faith is well placed in strong and enduring institutions. Now, would any Australians have accepted their vote, or the vote of one of their mates mattered less than another's, or that they were somehow less Australian than any of their fellow citizens? I've spent enough time in Australia to know for a fact that they never would. Well, Fijians weren't prepared to accept that either. That is why I enjoyed such massive public support as my government laid the careful groundwork for a new, true, and genuine democracy. That effort gave birth to the 2013 Fijian Constitution, which finally established a common national identity, declaring all of our citizens as Fijians with equal rights under the law. Under that same Constitution, we've successfully held 2 genuine parliamentary elections. And I stand before you, Mr. Prime Minister, as the now twice democratically elected Prime Minister of Fiji, in elections determined by the international community to be fair, free, and fully legitimate. Through the entire tenure of my leadership, Fiji's progress is undeniable. Our economy has charted a record streak of uninterrupted growth, 9 years to be exact. Corruption no longer runs rampant and unchecked. Poverty is decreasing, inequity is shrinking, the institutions of our democracy are becoming stronger and more capable, and they are, most importantly, asserting their independence fiercely. Fiji stands today as an outright success, despite how the winds may blow in Canberra, in Wellington, Beijing, or Washington. We are a people responsible for our own future, for forging our own destiny, and we're doing a damn good job of it. But neither of our countries, Mr. Prime Minister, can achieve our most secure and prosperous future without each other. Australia's presence is needed in the Pacific. That is why no one is happier than I am that our countries have left our disputes in the past where they belong and must remain. Mr. Prime Minister, you are here in Suva on the back of unprecedented engagement between our countries, our peoples, and our economies. Your new step up has been imbued with an energy and enthusiasm by your High Commissioner in Fiji, John Fix, who has achieved so much in a short time with us. We're in a new era of bilateral relations. Truly begin this chapter new, the Australian government and the Australian people need to look at Fiji and the rest of the Pacific through a new lens. And that starts from the very top. Must begin the acknowledgement that as sovereign nations, we stand as equals. And your presence here, Mr. Prime Minister, provides that much needed recognition. You know as well as I know that the Fiji of today is strong. We are stable and we are paving the way for a future that can no longer be ignored. There is a new Fijian story unfolding, and I believe it is a story still very much worth telling. We are a model of success among small island nations. We, your neighbor in the Pacific, are open for business. We are an economic leader in this region, and we are a leader of the global stage when it comes to some of the most pressing and urgent challenges of our time. Mr. Prime Minister, we have just recently wrapped up our landmark presidency of the United Nations climate negotiations, handing the reins over to the Polish government at COP24 in December. But on the issue of climate change, Fiji will remain a champion. And I hope that Australia and the Australian people join us on the front lines of the global campaign for climate action. Because as we talk about the many steps of our relationship, including the step up, we must not forget that the steps we take leave footprints behind us. The impact of our actions today must be mindful of the legacy, the consequences that mark this path. Here in Fiji, climate change is no laughing matter. The threat faced by Fijians and all Pacific Islanders is enormous. And with each passing day, that danger becomes more serious. Our countries are being rocked by more frequent and more severe cyclones and deadlier flooding, every storm carrying the disastrous potential to bring our entire economy to its knees. The rising seas threaten whole communities, forcing them to endure the trauma of relocating from land they've called home for generations. Fijian farmers are watching their crops perish in soil that has been spoiled by the heightened salinity levels associated with sea level rise. Prime Minister, I urge your predecessor repeatedly to honor his commitment to a clean energy future, the only future that guarantees the survival of your neighbors in the Pacific. From where we are sitting, we cannot imagine how the interest of any single industry can be placed above the welfare of Pacific peoples and vulnerable people in the world over. Because the effects of climate change are a threat to everyone, everywhere. From the disappearing coastlines of Bangladesh to the scorching heat drying out land across sub-Sahara Africa, to the worsening flooding in low-lying cities in the United States and in Australia as well, where soaring temperatures have hit record highs in several of your cities just this week. This cannot be written off as a difference of opinion. Consensus from the scientific community is clear, and the existential threat posed to Pacific Island countries is a certainty. Fiji is proud that much of the world has embraced one of the key legacies of our COP presidency, Talanoa Dialogue, our Pacific concept of inclusive, blame-free engagement to help determine how we can all do more to meet the climate threat. And we look to every nation, Australia included, to raise the ambition in the climate struggle. Prime Minister, if history has shown us anything, it is that our nations are always better served when we act as good neighbors. And as of our newest partnership, we're now more than just neighbors. We have family, Uvale. As members of the same family, we must be honest with each other. We must stay at the table, even when we may disagree, and we must each do our part to maintain a safe and happy home for all of us in the Pacific. That is what our citizens deserve and what we must strive to achieve throughout all of our engagement. On many issues, we see eye to eye. Your continued support towards our agenda for Fijian progress will lead to a more stable, secure, and successful Pacific for all people. Not a neighborhood where any nation's success is determined by the availability of aid, but where every country is treated with dignity, every economy can stand on its 2 feet, and every relationship defined by mutual confidence, trust, and respect. Prime Minister, you know personally that Fiji is a special place, and the Fijian people shine with a spirit of warmth, hospitality, and friendliness you won't find anywhere else in the world. I trust you and Jenny have enjoyed your time back with us so far. As for the governments we lead, from here on out, let every step we take be a step forward. Let every one of those steps be taken together. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Vinaka.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison, I am pleased to now call on Ambassador Vilati.
Nisambula, Her Excellency Major General Conroti, President of the Republic of Fiji, who I had the honour of meeting earlier today, and Her Excellency the past President who's with us tonight. Prime Minister Bainimarama and Mrs. Bainimarama, can I thank you on behalf of Jenny and I and our entire delegation for the warm embrace with which you've met us here today and on so many other occasions, Prime Minister Bainimarama. It has been a wonderful start to our friendship over the past few months, and to come here today together with Jenny and our delegation, you have expressed a warmth that has laid the foundation for everything you have just spoken about, and I thank you. The other ministers who are here this evening, to distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. It is a great honour to attend this state dinner tonight at this marvellous hotel. This venue and locality, many of you I know, has a great place in the story of Australia. Just over 90 years ago, the intrepid and fearless Charles Kingsford Smith set out on the Southern Cross to make the first trans-Pacific flight. The flight was to have 3 legs. The first, California to Hawaii, the second, Hawaii to Suva, and the third was from Suva to Australia. The longest leg was from Hawaii to Suva, and during it, Kingsford Smith and his crew encountered storms. Mighty storms. They were in the air for about 32 hours, and mid-flight it appeared for all intents and purposes there would not be enough fuel for them to reach Suva. According to their mid-flight calculations, they were short by about 170 miles. Not good news. But they improvised, as Australians do, and fortunately, the weather and fate turned their way, and luck was a bit on their side too. And on that day, 90 years ago, thousands of Fijians waited patiently at Albert Park, just next to this hotel. But it's not really the place to land a plane, particularly one that doesn't have any brakes. One of the crewmen later wrote that from the sky, Albert Park was about as large as a pocket handkerchief and not half as useful. And with fuel low, Kingsford Smith flew close to the earth. So close, he scurried over the top of the roof of this very hotel. And I suspect if he had hit this hotel, you wouldn't have invited an Australian Prime Minister to be having dinner here this evening. But thankfully, he cleared it. And on that fateful leg, one of the crewmen had what they would call today a catastrophic wardrobe failure and disaster. Let's just say it was the result of the extreme turbulence. And it was so bad the crew member had to strip naked for the last part of the flight. And so as they were landing, the plane bounced on the ground. And as it hit the ground so hard, the naked crewman fell out of the back of the plane. He survived, but his pride, I suspect, may have been a little injured. I can tell you, though, that Australia's national pride wasn't injured because the naked crewman, he was an American. So to this day, Charles Kingsford Smith and his memory and that of his crew are revered in Australia, and Suva played a pivotal role, vital role in that wonderful achievement. But, you know, it's only one of so many, many stories about Fiji and Australia and our peoples and our relationship. And in this Fiji-Australia relationship, there is another son I think we should revere tonight. And he is Trooper Edgar Wright. He is a son of Fiji and he is a son of Australia. He was born in 1892 and home to Edgar was the lush green coconut plantations of Bua. And he attended school in Voreqe and Suva. And during his formative years, he and his brothers made it to Australia. And Edgar, with his brothers Maitland and George, joined the Australian Infantry Force at the start of the First World War. George landed in Gallipoli and was subsequently injured. Edgar and Maitland fought in the Sinai as part of the 6th Light Horse. On the 4th of August 1916, Edgar was in hospital having taken sick and he was in no fit state to be on the front. But in hospital he heard that fighting had erupted in El Mala. And that's where his brother was. And that's where his mates were. So Edgar left his sickbed. He obtained a horse and he rode out to join his mates. That day, Trooper Edgar Wright was struck down by enemy fire. He was just 24. This son of Fiji and this son of Australia has written on his tombstone the words, "Not what I am, but I do as my kingdom." Tonight we pay respect to our peoples who demonstrate every day that it's what we do that counts. What we do as governments, and indeed, Prime Minister, what we do as leaders of governments as we are demonstrating. It should be for them, our peoples, as our objectives are here together as we have met today on other occasions. Deeds more than words. Our relationship is anchored by geography, but it is much more than that. We are not just our geography. We are not just the sum of our deals and funding arrangements, transactions. We are the product of the values and beliefs that we share as peoples. We are both island nations, united by a love of family, of community, sport, faith, a deep respect for each other, in the very kind words but very true words spoken by Prime Minister Bainimarama, that no Fijian is greater than another and no Australian is greater than another. These are deeply held values that we share as countries, and that when we come together, we demonstrate as to how things should be done. Our societies are shaped by these beliefs and common traditions, and ours is a relationship as a result of deep respect because we understand deep respect. And I want to pay respect in particular to Prime Minister Bainimarama's international leadership on climate change and oceans, I should also note. And you have heard him speak passionately about this evening, and it was that same passion he took into the leadership of the COP process over the past 12 months. But not just on behalf, I know, of Fiji, but as a true leader in the Pacific. And so in coming together in the way we have done over these months, I have come to recognise not just the Prime Minister and leader of Fiji, who has shown exemplary leadership and the achievements he's been able to deliver for his people now over many years, but a leader in the Pacific, a leader that other leaders in the Pacific look to as well. And we also respect Fiji's service as peacekeepers in some of the most challenging parts of the world, and Jenny and I earlier this evening had the real honour to go and pay our respects to those Fijian servicemen who have laid down their lives in the cause of peace. Whether it was in Lebanon, Syria, Sinai. You Australians would know just how many Fijians have made the ultimate sacrifice for world peace in each of these missions at very difficult times. And it was a great honour for us, Prime Minister, to be able to pay our respects not just to their service, but also those Fijians who served in the conflicts of World War I and II and Malaya, serving in many other nations' militaries, but still defending the same values and beliefs that they held so deeply and motivated them to serve. We pay respect to your government's ambitious program of economic reforms. We both have a strong view about a strong economy, because without a strong economy, as Prime Minister Bainimarama has been able to lead here, 9 years now, then you can't deliver on the health and education services and the many other things that progressive societies need to ensure that they can deliver for their people. And we respect, or I should probably say fear, the prowess of Fijians on the sporting field. For many Australians, including me, the links between Australia and Fiji are deeply personal. 360,000 Australians visit Fiji every year. Jenny and I are often two of them, and with Lily and Abby, four of us. We're also proud to be home in Australia to 70,000 Fijian-born Australians. And it's because of these deep and enduring personal links that Australia and Fiji are more than partners. We are family, Voreqe. One of the risks of close relationships is sometimes they can be taken for granted, and there are periods in our past where that has been the case. Not now, and not in the future, if there's anything that my government has to do with it. One of the risks is that we take those for granted, and we cannot allow those risks to be realised. Which is why tonight I announced that Prime Minister Bainimarama and I have agreed to enhance our bilateral relationship through the Australia-Fiji Voreqe Agreement, as we announced earlier also today. The agreement will add structure to our bilateral relationship. We will establish those mechanisms, those annual leaders' meetings, so these events are not one-offs, that they are part of a process of how we manage our relationship together as family. The agreement will identify new areas to expand our trade and investment relationship, to build personal connections, including those between our schools and our churches, and expand our cooperation in areas like peacekeeping, policing and border security. The agreement will be negotiated by officials in the coming months, and we look forward to signing the agreement later in the year, when I have invited Prime Minister Bainimarama and Mrs Bainimarama to visit Australia as our official guest. Through our Voreqe agreement, we will continue the enormous progress that has been made on the Australia-Fiji relationship. It will further cement that relationship between our two countries. Many years ago when I came to Fiji, I learned a word. I've learned many Fijian words over time. I'm not that great at languages. It just must be something special about the Fijian relationship and Fijian language. And I was just checking it again early today with the Prime Minister, because it does summarise how I feel about what the Fiji means to me, and it's wananavu. I'm glad people knew what that meant. That would have been very embarrassing. That's why I checked it with the Prime Minister. But it is. I had a friend here many, many years ago who used to use the word all the time, and he would express it with such passion. Everything was wananavu. And that, I think, demonstrates the passion for life, the passion for family, for friendship, for fun, for togetherness, for fellowship, that is so much expressed in the Fijian way of life. And that is something that I think Australians find, and indeed I find, completely intoxicating. It is a way of life that is a real lesson, I think, to around the world. When we look at the simple appreciation of the most important things of life, you find that lived out in the families and the peoples of Fiji. And Prime Minister, it has been our pleasure to be able to come and share these few days with you here and with the people of Fiji as we build on what I know will continue to be a great relationship. So I thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your hospitality. I commend you on your achievements, and particularly on your recent re-election as Prime Minister. I'm hoping a bit of that rubs off on me while I'm here as we go back to Australia. But it has demonstrated that you're achieving in this country what Australia wants for Fiji and for all the nations of the Pacific: independence, sovereignty, prosperity, bright future, peace, stability, see a smile on our children's faces. Doesn't get any better than that. So thank you very much. Manaka whakalevu. Mole.